Hey everybody, welcome to 36 Charge, a podcast about competitive Warhammer 40k, the state of the game, and community news. I am Chris Vo, and joining me tonight is Kevin Lieb.
Howdy, howdy.
And Benjamin Rubenstein.
Hey everyone.
Hey, so tonight's episode is a GT roundup. We had a couple of GTs over the weekend, including one that Benjamin played in down in Connecticut at the Portal. Well, you know, I do want to talk about the London GT and the Warzone Houston, and just get the results from that. Don't really want to dive too much into lists about that because aside from one list in particular, it's basically the same shit that you've been seeing for the past 4 months. So, we I don't want to dive into Ben's experience at the Portal GT running Thousand Suns. And, basically just how it went. But let's go over GT results real quick. London GT, first place, to nobody's surprise, is Admech. Second place was Deathwatch. Third place was Death Guard. And then fourth place was Sisters. So,
sure.
Yeah, that's whatever. There was another GT in somewhere in England just called Warhammer 40k Matched Play, so great name there. But it was Orcs, Harlequins, Custodes, and Orcs again. And then the interesting one is Warzone Houston, where Black Legion won, pure Black Legion, followed by Orcs and Orcs and Drukhari. The Black Legion one, it's kind of interesting. Ben, do you want to talk about that just real quick?
The Black Legion list?
Yeah.
So that list is barely a Chaos Space Marine list. It's really, so it's, all right, so it's a battalion of Black Legion with Abaddon the Despoiler, which we haven't seen on the table in a long time, but he's still just a heinous melee monster. Chaos Lord and Terminator armor with a Chain Fist and a Relic Bolter called Angel's Bane, which is, if I remember correctly, rapid fire 3 at 5-2/2, but it's flat 3 damage against Imperium, so it just kind of murders the crap out of Custodes and Gravis Armor Marines. Chaos Cultists, more Chaos Cultists. So that's three 10-man squads of Chaos Cultists, because Chaos Space Marine troops are terrible, so just take the cheap ones. But here's where things get weird. A Chaos Contemptor Dreadnought with Cyclone missile launchers and las cannons. It's not marked. A second one with the same loadout. And then a Leviathan Dreadnought with Gravflux Bombard, 3 Hellforge Hunter killer missiles, and storm cannons. And this one's marked Khorne.
And it's got the chest Volkites.
Yeah, it's got the chest Volkites, because the other option for the chest is just not as good. There's a Decimator with Soulbirder Petards, which is the Mortal Wound gun. And then it has a Terex Pattern Termite Drill with Mark of Khorne with Twin Volkite Chargers and Terex Volkite Chargers. Sorry, 2 Twin Volkite Chargers and 2 Twin Terex Volkite Chargers. Sorry, that's one selection. Battlescribe spits out that kind of weird. Also, it has 5 Meltaguns because that's just the loadout of that thing. Chaos Space Marines being an ancient codex, this thing being Khorne marked means it can double fight, and its weapon is D3 plus 6 damage or something ridiculous. So this is actually a huge melee threat on that thing. It's also toughness 8 and has 12 wounds, 13 wounds.
It's somewhere around there, yeah.
And rounding out the list, just to keep things nice and balanced, is a Khorne Lord of Skulls, also Black Legion. With a Core Storm Cannon and a Hades Gatling Cannon. So it's all vehicles. He's basically just looking at people and going, did you bring enough Meltaguns? And the answer was no.
Apparently not.
People did not bring enough Meltaguns. I'm very curious about the loadout on the Contemptors with all of the las cannons. Because that's a really squishy platform to be 250.
It's super
points.
Squishy. I learned that over the weekend when I played against another game against Thousand Suns, where just the Inferno bolt guns were doing appreciable damage to my Contemptors.
Yeah, that being said, you're always going to get one volley off of them because they're small and they're fast. 8 inches, but fast enough. So they can be behind terrain and then basically get line of sight with a need to and just crack it in half because they have 4 las cannon shots and 2 missile launcher shots. Yeah, that's just weird. Then the Leviathan with the 1 Graphic Bombard and 1 Storm Cannon. I think this is the first time I've ever seen someone take a Leviathan without either 2 of the same gun or melee plus gun.
Yeah, it's really weird.
And those 2 guns are doing very different things.
They have 2 very different ranges.
Yeah. It's also marked corn, which I don't think the mark for the Dreadnoughts does particularly much, but
it is weird.
Yeah, it's strange that it's marked corn. He probably just actually suspect that the marks on the actually, you know what? I think it's infantry only that can do the demon strats. Okay, so all right, these chaos marks are just how he painted them because I don't think they do anything.
They do nothing because he doesn't have like any sorcerers to like put it on like this god specific spell or anything.
All right, so the marks are just how he painted them. I'm thinking too hard about it. And then the core Lord of Skulls, I can basically guarantee he's spending 1 command point every turn to reroll hits and wounds and shooting, and it has an unbelievable amount of firepower. And then core is not a thing yet for Chaos Space Marines, so Abaddon's giving all these things reroll all hit rolls.
Yeah, that's like the one thing.
I think that's what's happening here, right? Like that's the. Sorry, go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, that's like the one thing that's like, if there's a saving grace of old codexes, it's the core concept. Also, when you think about all these options are mirrored in the Space Marine options, so yeah, they don't get doctrines, which is a big hit, but you still to compensate you get like full rerolls, and that's a pretty big compensation.
Yeah, you also get to play Abaddon, who like we talk a lot about how the Chaos Space Marine book is really bad. If the Chaos Space Marine book was balanced, like was actually like everything else, and there was a reasonable choice, Abaddon would probably have to be like 350 points. Like the model is ridiculously unbelievable in melee. It kills everything it touches. It's eligible to double fight. It spits out like 12 plus attacks that are all like strength 8 or higher with high AP and multi damage.
Don't forget 1 CP for Veterans of the Long War.
Oh goodness, I forgot. He can Veterans himself. If you're Imperium, because he's the Warlord, he explodes on 5s. And he's full rerolls. He gives himself full rerolls, so he will reroll all of his hit rolls. Because he only misses on 1s, but he double hits on 5s and 6s. Well, rerolls, he gets another attack, but he hits on 2s rolling 1, so like he will just hit you. And then he's ridiculously janky. He's got 8 wounds, all weapons deal half damage to him, 2 up armor, 4 up invulnerable save. Like the thing just doesn't die. He's got the Nurgle keyword, so he can heal himself with the strat. Like Abaddon's no joke. And then the Chaos Terminator armor dude is just like, I guess I gotta another guy to hand out reroll 1s to hit because again, core is just not a thing.
Yeah, and you know, like Abaddon can't be everywhere.
And Abaddon can't be everywhere. Yeah, because you want to be shoving him down your opponent's throat, basically.
Yeah, so he was just basically just betting that there just was not going to be enough strength 8, you know, AP4, AP3 guns on the table, and he won that bet.
The trick with that, right, is that your turn 1 you're hiding these Chaos Contemptor Dreadnoughts with the like basically 6 las cannons or 4 las cannons and 2 missile launchers, and the second your opponent pokes their anti-tank out, you're just like, all right, here's like 12 las cannons with full rerolls to hit going into whatever thing you have as a solution to my vehicles, and like then they're gone, and now like yeah, you'll probably pick up the Chaos Contemptors with just like whatever, but once you've like thrown all your stuff at them to kill them, like
but then what do you do against the Leviathan?
There's a Leviathan and a Decimator and Abaddon, and like you need the same kind of firepower to kill Abaddon that you need to kill Leviathan. Like, so you're probably not able to do both of those at the same turn. And now you're just like falling apart because they do a lot of damage. It's not the best list ever. There's definitely some weaknesses for, you know, Chaos is not the strongest list. They just have some efficiency issues in terms of like their troop choices are truly, truly awful. Like the cultists are just really, really bad. But Abaddon does like solve some of those issues, right? They're immune to morale within 12 inches of him. Reroll hit rolls, like so they can like kind of hold their own guardsmen if they get to shoot first. This list is sweet. It's very different. If you're going to play Chaos Space Marines, this is a way to do it.
Yep, everything that we've seen for Chaos Marines lately has just been like skew type list where it's just like, hey, hope you brought enough melt-a-guns. Everything has a 5-up pinball.
It should also be noted that we say Chaos Space Marines are really bad all the time, and that hasn't changed. Everything below the cultists is Forge World. Like, it's 3 cultists, Abaddon character, 3 Forge World dreads, Forge World transport. I guess the Corn Lord of Skulls isn't Forge World, but that's also like the one thing in the book that we've kind of liked before, because it's a knight with 4 rerolls of hit and wounds, and that's, ridiculous.
Yeah, when we're talking Chaos Space Marines are bad, it's like, do you see chaos, like the Chaos Space Marines, the dudes? Do you see the dudes?
I mean, Abaddon wears power armor. Terminator armor.
He does wear power armor. No,
it's Terminator armor.
The thing is with the
so
I see Chaos Marines being bad in their internal balance, the Codex internal balance being fucking awful, because in order to do anything like appreciable on the tabletop with Chaos Marines, you're basically taking like, all right, what is the most points efficient, jankiest unit that I could like grab? Like, all right, I have to take 3 of these. Like the last few months, like the Chaos lists that you've seen with success have been Iron Warriors and taking like 2 or 3 Lord of Skulls.
Yep.
Maybe you might splash in a Dreadclaw with Noise Marines in there, but by and large, it's been all Iron Warriors. So seeing Black Legion out first is honestly a breath of fresh air, even though it is still kind of like the same archetype of taking the good stuff from the Codex and basically only that.
Yeah, I really like this list though. There's a lot of cool things happening here.
Yeah. Then let's talk about the Portal Fall GT. 28 players, 5 rounds. Let's see. Top 4 was Dan Wolmuth with Sisters.
Oh, be right back.
I should have had this up before I started talking about it. I only remember Dan.
Second place was TJ Lanigan with Thousand Suns. Third place was, I want to say, was Mike with Nurgle. Was my 1 loss. Fourth place was Daniel Axe or David Axe. There's 2 brothers. It's Daniel and David Axe, and I can never remember which was which.
Was he playing Necrons? Because David plays Necrons. Dan plays. It was Dan.
Okay, Dan with Knights. Fifth place was a Custodes player, I want to say.
Necrons.
Oh, was this the other Axe brother?
Nope, this was Casey Glynn.
Casey Glynn, and then 6th place was me with Thousand Suns.
Yep, and those are all of the people with at least 4 wins in this 5-round tournament.
I managed to go 4-1, which I was very happy with. That was kind of my goal. I said it's a new book. I don't have the exact models I would like to have, but I feel like I'm a pretty confident player. I feel like it's a very powerful book. And I think I can go 4-1 in a GT with it, and I did. So I'm very happy with that. So
let's start with like, what was your overall game plan going into the GT? Like we don't have to go over like the exact list, but like, what was your plan for each of the phases? Yeah, basically.
So about the list, we've talked about the list a lot with that like 180-ish points of flex. In the end, I did manage to get a T-Suns Contemptor Dreadnought with Volkites together, so that's what I ran. And then it was that triple Rubik Marines with everything in Rhinos, 2 Sorcerers on discs, Armon on a disc, Zanger Shaman, Witch Warrior, and Terminator Armor, and then the guy on foot, like another Sorcerer on foot. So it was like 6 Sorcerers or 5 Sorcerers and Zanger Shaman, tons and tons of casting. Carol is an awesome TO. Also the head judge for BFS. And she runs a different format. I like having a different format like around, because it kind of keeps things interesting, where it's like when I go to Carol's tournaments, I know that like terrain is a very specific way. It's a little different. And she doesn't allow faction secondaries, which we've talked a lot about here. So big part of my plan was she doesn't allow faction secondaries, so I better have some good freaking secondaries ready to go. So I built my list to be able to max while we stand, we fight, or to the last rather. So my 2 last targets was Armon and 2 Sorcerers on discs. They're all super, super fast. They're all characters, so you just protect them behind vehicles, or in my case, it's basically just vehicles, because it's triple help route. I had like 8 vehicles. I had 3 help routes, 3 rhinos, a vindicator, and a Volkite Contemptor Dread. So that was part of the plan. The other one was I was going to take a ritual every time, psychic ritual, which is you got to do an action in the middle of the table. It's a psychic action, goes off on a 4. First time gets you 3 points, second gives you 8, third gives you 12. It used to have to be the same character every time. It's not anymore. Although for me, it was the same character almost every time because it's Zanger Shaman. I did a lot of like Zanger Shaman moves in the middle of the table, cast a spell, make the spell undeniable. Guy behind the Zanger Shaman will not roll warp time, just spend some Cabal points, make it go off. Zanger Shaman gets out of the way. Oh, cool. My secondary is done. So I had to go first a lot. And basically every time I had to go first, I was just like, get enough things out of rhinos to have 15 Cabal points. Do that. My turn's over. With like some shooting mix in occasionally when my opponent had stuff out. So that was the main game plan. The main game plan was I have 2 secondaries that I'm just going to do every time. I'm going to do banners sometimes. I'm going to do mission secondaries sometimes, and I'm going to kill my opponent's mortals when I have to. Any questions?
No. Did you face any like? What were your matchups? What...
So round 1, Gil was at the event, therefore I was obligated to play Gil round 1. We were 3 for 3 for doing this. This time it's the most impressive because there were 28 people in the room, and we still played each other round 1. He plays sisters. I kind of just shot him off the table. He was unable to hold the primary for enough. It was closer than it probably would have been otherwise because we played the stupid mission. Not the scouring, the other terrible one. Four objectives down the center. You hold objectives forever once you get on them. Not retrieval. Oh my goodness.
Vital intelligence.
Yes, vital intelligence. I can't believe I just completely blanked on vital intelligence. So yeah, round 1, vital intelligence. Woof. So hold 1. Sorry, it's a hold 2, hold 3, with all of the objectives like in the middle of the table. And I'm playing against like melee sisters backed up by flamethrower sisters because that's his list. He's playing Ebon Chalice and Bloody Rose, featuring Celestine and Morvenval. So that was interesting. He kind of came around to like the right side of the table. So I did have 1 unit of River Greens and a Rhino kind of just like fling themselves off onto some objectives off in a corner. And like I had 1 Rhino and 5 River Greens like hold that objective for most of the game. Even he like deep struck some guys around them and then realized that his like hand flamer pistol Seraphim were just never going to move 5 River Greens off of an objective because I make 2-up saves against everything that unit can throw at me. So I basically got to hold that objective the whole game. And then his army kind of came around a corner, killed a Vindicator with shooting, and then came face to face with 5 sorcerers and everything died. Like I just killed all of his sisters, basically 2 turns of psychic and shooting. The Volkite Contemptor did a ton of heavy lifting. It was able to scoot around a building and get line of sight on basically all of his multi-meltas, which was the big thing I was afraid of. So 1 of the unit multi-meltas, basically he got to trade each unit of his multi-meltas for like a Rhino. 1 killed the Vindicator, 1 killed the Rhino, and they both died. And at that point, my rest of my vehicles were pretty safe from everything he could do other than melee. And whenever he touched one of melee, it died. But then I got to take out that melee threat, and in the end, with psychic, and in the end, he just didn't have as many threats as I did. So that was like a pretty straightforward win for me. There were a couple places where deep strikes were a little concerning, but this is the beginning of the story of the Volkite Contemptor is allowed to Auspex skin, and that's really not okay because basically Gil could never come in anywhere close to where anything was like to anything that was important. Because it was just standing in the middle of my Psychers. So whenever he wanted to like put something, he couldn't put anything in charge range of Psychers ever because the Volkite Contemptor would just kill the entire unit in Auspex scan.
It's even better than Auspex scan because you don't have the -1.
Yeah, there's no penalty. And Armon was giving a +1 hit every turn. So it's just hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s, winning on 2s. And that's just like just annihilating sisters.
Yeah, that just totally just deletes them.
Yep. So we get round 2. And again, I took those 2 secondaries and I took Assassinate because he had a bunch of characters and I was pretty sure I was going to be able to kill them. Round 2, I played against, oh goodness, I remember our round 3 matchup very vividly. My round 2 matchup was pretty tough. I need to pull up on BCP. I apologize. I'm going to skip to round 3. I'm so sorry whoever played round 2. I can't believe I just completely
Steve.
What was that?
Steve Wolmuth.
Oh my goodness. I played Tao. It's so funny. I play against Steven so often. I forget in which events I played against him. All right. I play against Steven Wolmuth. He is the other top 10 Tau player who like frequents the portal. So the portal's meta is like all sorts of skewed because Tau's good there because there's only 2 Tau players that play there, and we both have overwhelmingly winning records with Tau. And the other weird thing about this event, there was 0 Admech or Jakari. There was 1 Admech player. He dropped last minute, so there ended up being no Admech Jakari. So it was like a very interesting meta. So I played against Steven. That matchup's just terrible for him. Shield drones don't work against psychic powers, and I basically blew all of his broadsides off the table on turn 2 between turn 2 and turn 3. I just took everything off the table with psychic powers. Because normally when you're trying to kill Tau, you have to kill like 40-ish wounds worth of, like, it feels like 40 wounds of shield drones because all your anti-tank weapons just go to damage 1. But for me, like, I smite a unit of shield drones, 2 shield drones die. All of a sudden, that's like the unit that was in front. And now I'm smiting into broadsides or doing targeted things in the broadsides. And the broadsides only have 5 wounds, 6 wounds. They just die to psychic powers really fast. So that game was like pretty straightforward. Game 3 was my loss. I played against Nurgle. Like just all Nurgle stuff. 18 Beasts of Nurgle, great and clean one, 3 Plague Burst Crawlers. I think the matchup was normally pretty hard for me. I would be interested to see how it would go in a normal world. But we did not play in a normal world. The world that we played in, one of my rhinos exploded and it blew up a Hellbrute, and then I rolled all 3s for my characters, and I basically killed 4 of my 6 psychers with vehicle explosions.
Nice.
A couple guys lived with 1 wound, and then Disgusting Force finished them all off. So like it wasn't a game. On turn 2, every psyker in my army was dead because of a really unfortunate chain reaction explosions. I think that game would have been very close if that hadn't happened, but it did. So I don't have my opponent and I are both kind of in agreement that like the game would have been interesting. We're not sure who would have won, but that happened, so I never had a chance. And that's not to say I didn't make mistakes that game. I do think I made mistakes. I think I deployed things. I think I made a mistake in deployment. I put 2 rhinos to contest a side objective. Also, we were playing the Scouring, which is like not good for me against this list as well. So day 1 we had both Vital Intelligence and the Scouring. Missions are all rolled randomly at that GT. So I do feel like I learned from that game because I certainly made mistakes, and so I have like things I would do differently now, which is good. I don't necessarily know if those mistakes were game costly, and I don't think there's anything I could have done to actually have won that game if that explosion chain happens. Other than
what's one of those things that you would have done differently?
It's like I said, I had a rhino. I had like 2 rhinos full of rubrics contesting side objectives, and I think I would have just done 1. I had a Hellbrute trying to sneak around a building that in the end, he was like playing cat and mouse with a Volkite with a Plague Burst Crawler, and in the end, I should have just like shoved all of my anti-tank down the middle of the table. So things like that. But again, I lost all of my psychers on turn 2, so it was rough. My opponent was I was very disappointed about it, but I know I kind of just looked at my opponent and I was like, I'm just going to try and score as many points as possible. I did some like pretty fun things. Like I had fun that game. Like basically the rest of the game was the Zangor Shaman doing his very best to stay out of melee so that every turn he could hop into the middle and do the psychic ritual. And it ended with on turn 4, he was stuck in melee. He moved 12 out. I taught a unit of Rubric Marines Warp Time. They auto-cast on him to throw him behind a building. And on my next turn, he snuck out and finished off Warp Ritual for me. I lost heinously because I couldn't score the primary. But it was still like neat trying to figure out like, all right, everything's gone completely wrong. How do I score points? So that was neat. So that was day 1. Day 2, played against Craftworld Eldar. And this game was interesting, but pretty one-sided. I was pretty far up the entire time. He realized he knew rather, because he he was buddies with TJ, and TJ kind of was helping a little bit figuring out what my list would do before the game. I heard them talking about it. So he knew that anything that came near me was just going to die in the psychic phase. So he played pretty far back. But that, of course, then means that I dominated on a bunch of primary and secondary stuff. So I ended up getting pretty far up on the points. And I won by a pretty large margin. He actually didn't let me cast spells most of the game. Like for the majority of the game, my damage psychers, like my psychers who have like damaging psychic powers, just like didn't do anything. It's like my warlord like actually just cast the psychic power that gives me an extra command point. Not my warlord, my Rahadi. I think of him as a warlord because he's like the scary psyker in the army. The warlord is actually the Anger Shaman, like I said before. But the Rahadi, the triple caster on a disc, who's casting on 3d6 rerolling ones for Flames of Zinch, spent 4 of the 5 turns just like giving me a command point every turn. And then on turn 4, he jumped out behind a building and killed 8 Shadow Specters with 1 psychic power, and then got back inside the building with warp time. And that was his contribution to the game.
It's a pretty good contribution.
But it was pretty good. I'm like, he like Shadow Specters are an expensive unit. Like 9 Shadow Specters is like 200 points. It's just like 1 psychic power, just boom, all of them are gone. Flames of Zinch is messed up. It's if it goes off, it goes off on a 6. Every 6 you roll 9d6. Every 6 is a mortal wound. But if it goes off on an unmodified 9 or higher, every 5 up is a mortal wound. And I've been playing him in Cult of Knowledge, so he rerolls ones to cast, and giving him the Athenian Scrolls. So he casts that spell on 3d6 rerolling ones, pick 2, which makes getting the 9 pretty easy. So he's actually getting 9 ups on that fairly often. And when he does, he's just annihilating units. And this is also one of the things where like getting to choose powers after they choose targets after they resolve is a big deal. Because I had a couple times in the GT where he'd walk up and I'd be like, I want to murder that character, and I'd cast the power. I missed the 9. Like, that's not going to kill the character. All right, let's kill some dudes off in front, because there's no point in taking 2 wounds off a character. I'd rather just like kill a Space Marine. So yeah, that was round 2. My last round was my tightest game. I won by a single point. It was against Grey Knights. I had read the Grey Knight Codex back to front a couple times now, but I've never actually played against them. So it was against 4 Nemesis Dread Knights. One of them was a Grandmaster. 3 of them were just like the normal one, with like a Tech Marine, Caldor Drago, 15 Strike Marines, and 20 Interceptors, the jump pack guys who can like jump, shoot, jump, and move 12 inches. And that was a heck of a game. Holy crap. I had a couple times where I really whiffed shooting in ways that probably shouldn't have. At one point, I took the invulnerable save off of the Dread Knight, shot at it with 6 multi-meltas, and took 3 wounds off of it. It was just like, well, that's statistically unlikely. I also shot at it with 3 rocket launchers. I also had a Volkite, like AP1 hitting on 2s, reeling 1 to hit, reeling 1 to win Volkite Contemptor, failed to kill 3 Marines on an objective. So there's some like pretty gross low rolling. Low rolling, like multiple times where I just like missed a Dread Knight by 1 wound or something. But that didn't like keep so that made the game a lot closer, because I think he was a lot more unfamiliar with my codex than I was with his, so that gave me a pretty big advantage there. And then those whiffs pushed it to like a really close game. And the whole thing was very tight, very technical. It was very cordial. I had a really good time. I really liked the guy. Very we had a very friendly game where it was like, he'd move a thing and be like, oh, I didn't want to put it there. I was like, yeah, it's fine, you can put it back. And I had a point where like I had a Dreadnought who was like looking out a window. I was like, oh, I realized he can't see the thing I thought he could see. Can I move him differently? I was like, oh yeah, sure. So it was very like for a game that was as close and tight as it was, like neither was at any point where like, nah, when he got you on like a movement thing. It was really, really a great experience. The game basically came down to, I took Bring It Down because I figured the Dread Knights were going to be a huge issue if he threw them at me. So he couldn't throw them at me if I took Bring It Down. And it came down to basically like I needed to kill a Dread Knight. And there was a Dread Knight like in the right corner of the, or like in like the middle of like the right upper like left corner of the table. And my whole army was down in the right corner. The only thing up there was my Witch Warrior and like 5 Rubric Marines. The Witch Warrior and the 5 Rubric Marines ran up. My Dilettante used the Dark Binder Crystal for the first time in like the whole tournament where the Dark Binder Crystal actually like did something, to throw another sorcerer across the table. And then those 3 sorcerers death hexed, reroll 1 wounds against it, and like took 7 wounds off of it in smites. And my Hell Brute with +6 inches on range managed to finish it off with this multi-melta through, hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s, wounding on 3s, rerolling 1s, take your invulnerable save, spend a command point to push it to AP5 so you don't get an armor save. Like we threw everything at that Dread Knight, took it down, and managed to scrape out a 1-point win. So that was a really well game. To back up the clock a little bit on that game, I think like one of the big turning points, the point where he started playing super cagely and like realized that he was going to like really be conservative with his models, was he had Grandmaster Nemesis Dread Knight had the thing where if you shoot at it, it can teleport. And so what most Grey Knight armies will do is they'll put that on a weak flank that doesn't have like a huge melee threat near it, and they'll just like you put it on the flank, shoot a bunch of things to death, charge in, murder a bunch of stuff, and then your melee is going to be out of range of it. And if you go to shoot it, they'll just teleport it back behind a wall, and then it'll just do it again next turn because it can re-deep strike itself, like it can teleport around the table. So he did that to me. He put it on a flank, kicked a rhino to death. 5 guys came out and held the objective out from under it. And then it was just standing there in front of all my Hell Brutes, which are completely not a threat to it because, again, if I target it, it just goes away. But my cabal of Psykers kind of just looked at each other and picked it up between 3 of them. Like there were 5 Psykers behind that building, and 3 of them just did. It has a 5-up feeling pain against mortal wounds, but I did like 20 mortal wounds to it between the 3 of them. And I think that was where he realized, like, oh, like this is just like the mortal wound output isn't real. Like, and that was my experience with the whole tournament. Is the mortal output for my army is like a joke. My issue was pretty much never can I kill it. It was just like, can I get in range? Like, if anything that was ever in range of me just died. The only person who was able to put a bunch of models in range of me and have them survive was Gil, because he was playing Sisters. So they all had like Feel No Pains and 5-up denies, and I just like didn't get all my powers off because that's just how Sisters work. And everyone else was just like, you can't put your models near me; they'll just go away. So that was my GT. Got 4-1. Was really happy with it. I had all my games were excellent. Like even the one where my rhino exploded, like my opponent was like totally like, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Like, it happens. And I kind of had fun trying to engineer like, all right, what's the world where I score over 30 points in this game where like my entire army just imploded on itself?
Yeah, that's like one of those things where your opponent is playing like Space Wolves or another like a salty army. They have like a 6-inch charge and they roll like snake eyes, and then you just like feel that in your soul, like even though like it's to your advantage, like it hurts you.
Like this was really good for me, but man, that is rough stuff, buddy. Yeah, 100%. I agree.
How was the terrain? You mentioned that in like the pre-show.
Yeah, so Kevin's played on this terrain too, so feel free to hop in whenever. But all the tables are exactly, there's like 3 setups, and all the tables are one of those 3 setups with one table that someone else brought that's like the wildcard table. So they all have L's, but the L's are not. They're smaller than Nova L's, and they're ruins. So they're multi-storied, but they're L-shaped ruins. And most tables have 4 of them, either facing towards or away from each other in various configurations, with 2 small obstacles and then like forests outside from that. With like, and then the opposite side usually has like rune walls or something like that. So it's a very interesting setup that there's fairly open firing lanes between buildings, but you can hide stuff. And it creates, I like it. It's very interesting terrain. I found to enjoy playing on it. But I definitely wouldn't want to run like a gun line that can shoot like or rather I wouldn't want to run like a slow melee army on it, because you do struggle to hide large amounts of things. You can hide like a couple squads or like a vehicle or a rhino in a building, but like most of the ruins you might have like, you're going to struggle to hide your whole army from your opponent's whole army. There's no boxes. There's no U ruins where it's like you stick it in there and you can't be seen from any side. There's always like an open exposed flank where like if your opponent comes around from a particular direction, you're going to get seen. Which is a bit different from a lot of places. Like a lot of places like have like full on like either like U's or boxes where like you just like put stuff in it and it's invisible. And there's pretty much nowhere on these tables where you're invisible from every angle. You can be invisible from many angles, but there's always like, and then the obscuring runes also tends to be pushed a little bit more towards the center. So armies that can advance and charge very long distances generally can threaten most things that are trying to hide. Which, has its ups and has its downs. There's no such thing as perfect 40k terrain. It's all going to favor someone. Kevin, how did you feel about that terrain? I feel like I've been doing a lot of talking. Oh, is Kevin not back yet?
No, not back.
Oh, okay.
No, I was just thinking my thoughts. So I've only actually played with it once for 9th edition, and agree with a lot of what you said. I felt like I played Iron Hands the one time, and I felt like with like a Dreadnought's ability to move 8 inches, there's very rarely could I not shoot what I wanted to with that 8 inches and shooting cross range. Which maybe not the biggest fan of it, though I know you had talked about like upping it. So maybe if there was it felt like it was close to the right amount of train, just needed a little bit more. Have they upped it since that tournament I went to like 2 months ago?
No, it hasn't gone up yet. Because I've been very successful with my Tau on this train, which is probably a sign that there needs to be like a little bit more. Because my Tau have been because oftentimes because of the way the L's are, once you touch one of them, anything that your opponent is not like really dedicated to hiding is just going to be in line of sight. You're going to be able to shoot it. So yeah, it's interesting. It definitely favors shooting armies, I feel. Which is also one of the reasons why I was just like, I wanted a bunch of bricks. I took, 8 vehicles for a reason. It was just like, I wanted big tanky things that could just like take hits, because infantry, yeah, you could take tanky infantry, but oftentimes the thing that makes infantry the tankiest is their ability to phase through walls and exist in places where they can't be seen. And you can't really do that on this terrain. So yeah, can I talk a little bit about the first and second place lists, because I helped build one of them, or rather tested against a bunch, and would like to think I am somewhat responsible for some of the decisions that would make.
Yeah, do you want to talk about the Sisters list or Thousand Suns? Why don't we talk about?
Let's talk about the T-Suns list that TJ brought.
Yep.
So he took Cult of Magic, Cult of Time. Cult of Time was his cult his warlord was in. He took the Demon Prince that reanimates when it dies with -1 damage taken. Took Armand, took 5 rubrics, squad of 5 spawn, squad of 4 spawn, and 10 Scarab Cult Terminators. And then in his other, and then he also had like a Volkite Contemptor in there. And then his other detachment, he had a second Volkite, a Leviathan with storm cannons, and then and then like a couple characters. He didn't take any of the extra sorcerers. He only took Armand. His sorcerers were and he also had a Infernal Master. But he didn't take any extra sorcerers. It was just like Armand, Exalted Sorcerer, Demon Prince, Infernal Master were his 4 big psychers, 2 units of River Greens, the big squad of Terminators, and like that was it for his psychers. And then a bunch of shooting out of the Volkite Contemptors and the Leviathan Dreadnought. That list seemed like pretty neat to me. He's basically stacking tons and tons of buffs on the Leviathan Dreadnought, because T-Suns actually have a lot of shooting buffs. You can give +1 strength, +1 AP, +1 to hit, and all of a sudden the Leviathan Dreadnought is going from like 16 shots on like 7 -1/2 to hitting on 3s to like 16 shots on 8 -2/2 hitting on 2s, and all of a sudden that's just killing anything. Like just anything just dies to that. I'm not in love with it because of its like points to defensive ratio, and I think that's something that T-Suns already kind of struggle with. I did feel like my board presence was just like really pathetic. Like I just did not have enough stuff to put places, because like my things just cost so many points. I'm like, is this what Custodes players feel like? And then the Leviathan is just like even more points for just a really small base that's not good at melee and is not particularly tanky for its point cost. But like I said, its damage output is obscene, so that's obviously why he's taking it. And the Volkite Contemptors are just ridiculous. And he just used the Terminators as like the place where his Psychers sat. He just used them to babysit the Psychers, and their shooting's really, really good. That list is really neat. I really liked it. I actually got to talk to TJ a lot because, well, we were just like between rounds we were talking because I was the other Thousand Suns player. We both had some ideas about the lists. Obviously, he's the better player than I am, and he's got some like cool insights on T-Suns. I actually liked what he was doing with Cult of Magic, something that I wasn't thinking about. Which was he's talking about how like if your opponent's like hiding behind vehicles with Cult of Magic, you can like smite, use the Cult of Magic power on the vehicle. Then the character takes a mortal wound. Then you can use Cabal points to make the character take D3 mortal wounds, and then you can use Cabal points to recast the power to hit the vehicle again, and that's D3 plus 2 mortal wounds. That kills a lot of characters. And then you also have multiple target smites. So like Cult of Magic just lets you like annihilate characters that are trying to hide behind other stuff. And that's really interesting. And I had not thought of it that way. So I'm sort of eyeing Cult of Magic now as potentially my second cult. If I don't go the Terminator route, which I'll probably end up going the Terminator route. But hey, if I go the Terminator route, I might go Cult of Magic and Terminators instead of Cult of Knowledge. In the end, I was happier with the Cult of Knowledge Warlord trait than I was with the Cult of Knowledge power. I didn't find myself capable of using that power as often as I thought I would be, because I tend to just like smite everything to death around my characters, and then the power would be out of range. And because my shooting was usually quite a bit further up than my characters were, so my characters oftentimes weren't able to reach with the power. So anyways, that was TJ's list. It seemed very good. You know, he pretty handily beat everyone but his last round opponent. With the exception of the Orc Buggy list he had to play round 3, because the Orc Buggies went first and immediately punked the Leviathan Dreadnought. And I think they also got one of the Volkites, because basically what happened is, you know, Wazbomb Blast Jet came flying over a building, and then a squad of Rubric Greens got annihilated by Squig Buggies, and then the Wazbomb Blast Jet is like 5 las cannons to hit on 3s and just, you know, instantly smoked the Leviathan Dreadnought. And then all of a sudden, TJ has to figure out how to beat like 20 buggies with not a Leviathan Dreadnought. He did do it, but I hear that I wasn't. I had a pretty long round 3, so I know the game was like very close though. First place was Daniel Wilmoth. He's someone I get to test with a lot. I'm really lucky that way because he's a really good player and he really pushes me, and I feel like I learn a lot from games with him. I'm actually gonna be helping him test for BFS because he wants more reps than against Thousand Suns, so I'm looking forward to that. So he used to be playing Argent Shroud and Bloody Rose, and he's recently switched to Ebon Chalice, which a lot of Sisters players have been switching to, because Ebon Chalice is really, really good against Dark Eldar and Admech because you have a bunch of Strength 6 AP1 heavy flamers. Which is normally great, except that no Dark Eldar or Admech showed up to this event, and every single person was just rocking a bunch of vehicles. So he took one look at the rosters, he looks at me and goes, I want my multi-melts back. And I 100% agree. I think that the Argent Shroud list would have been way, way better into this meta.
He would have gone undefeated to even more undefeated.
Yeah, I think he would have had a better time, especially as he actually was almost out of the event game 1. He got tabled on like 4 against Orc Buggies going first. Because like his opponent went first in Orc Buggies, and he had a bunch of stuff in Deep Strike, but he had like at the end of that turn, he had, I think it was 10 Retributors hiding in buildings after the rhinos that they were in had gotten shot out from under them. Like Celestine, Morvenval, a Hospeler, and like a Union of Sacrosancts. And that's it. Everything else was dead or in Deep Strike. And he barely managed to pull that one out on points, but he got tabled on 5 and still like barely managed to pull through, because the Orc Buggy list can sometimes function a little bit like the Tau list, where it just shoots you off the table but can struggle with points. So anyway, though, Ebon Chalice, bunch of Flamer Retributor squads, oftentimes going inside of Rhinos with Dominions, who are the Stormbolter girls, who have the deal 6 mortal wounds for 1 command point strat, and then can also they always get to scout move the Rhinos. Seraphims with Hand Flamers, who can also come down and do mortal wounds with the Ebon Chalice strat. And then Bloody Rose attachment with a bunch of which Repentia with a Repentia Superior, a bunch of Zephyrum. And the thing that makes that really interesting is that on turn 1, because you're playing Ebon Chalice, you're guaranteed a 6 on a Miracle die, which means that your Repentia have very safe like long bomb charges because they advance on 2d6 drop 1, charge on 3d6 drop 1. But you're like, all right, well, one of those 2d6 is going to be a 6. I'm giving them +1 to advance and charge as like the blessing. And all of a sudden, you're like 9 Repentia can just go like 20 plus inches like very easily on turn 1.
Yeah, in my experience, they've always had like a insane threat range, and it can take you off guard. Like
the threat range has always been good, and then when you play Ebon Chalice, your turn 1 threat range is like because normally you have to like wait until you like get some 6s. And like sometimes you do early and sometimes you don't. And Ebon Chalice is like every time, here's the 6, we're charging 20 inches. And that does a lot for the melee threat of that list when I gets to go first. I don't know the full details of that list, but I do of that game. But I do know that the 2 major highlights, as Dan told it, was Celestine fairly early into the game got to touch the Leviathan Dreadnought with the Sacrosancts behind her. So on TJ's turn, he couldn't shoot the Leviathan at her because she was bodyguarded, but it was in melee with her, so it couldn't shoot at anything. And then
Can we?
And then like
pause that how bad Celestine plays with the bodyguard. Like,
oh yeah, it's Celestine interaction with bodyguard is a mess
silly
right now. And then I know like some number of Sacrifants got injured from psychic powers, and then no, I apologize. All the psychic powers went into basically everything else. A Hostler walked up to the Sacrosancts, got as many of them back onto their feet as possible. I think that the squad got back to full, and then 10 Sacrosancts got every melee buff in the army, went into 7 Scarab Cult and killed all of them, and that was basically where the game ended. Because Dan, unlike basically every other Sisters player on the planet, takes the 2 damage weapon, not the 1 damage weapon. And against T-Suns, that's the weapon you want. Because you need to be doing multi damage to kill the Terminators. Otherwise, you're just not killing them with enough damage. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know the full details of the game. That's the 2 highlights that I got. But those are both the Sisters list is pretty standard at this point. We've seen a lot of Ebon Chalice Bloody Rose. If the meta starts to shift towards like it is in the Portal, we might see a shift back to Argent Shroud because every list was just vehicles. Like the scariest lists were like Knights, 1 million Orc Buggies. I'd like to say my T-Sun's list was fairly scary. It features a bunch of vehicles. TJ's list was definitely scary. It features a bunch of vehicles. Custode's list, that was 2 of the Custodes hover tanks and a bunch of jet bikes. Which the jet bikes are functionally vehicles, like they're T6 with invulnerable saves and 2 up armor.
Yeah, that's a vehicle. It just doesn't have the keyboard.
Right? It's a light vehicle. The whole meta was just vehicles, which is really weird. Because that's just not the meta at large. All right, I've been talking a bunch, so I'm gonna let you guys either comment or ask me questions or something.
Go ahead.
So with all of these vehicles, do you think like there's like I know like 5th place here, 4th place saw like a Knight Castellan, and last week we saw that AdMech list that brought a Castellan. And do you think we're gonna see a resurgence in the big bad of 8th edition?
I wouldn't be shocked. Like I actually had dinner with the Castellan player afterward, and he was just like, yeah, most of the lists were just like a bunch of vehicles, and he had a Castellan and a Valiant, and they just killed everything. Like every target was just like, oh yeah, all right, I'm gonna pick like 600, 700 points up every turn. And you're just tabled on 3 if you bring a bunch of vehicles against 2 Dominus class Knights. So yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if like Castellans just start seeing play again. If this is what the meta is gonna actually look like. I don't think this is what the meta is gonna actually look like. Pretty sure AdMech still just gonna keep smashing people, and all the AdMech players are just busy this weekend.
Yeah.
But once AdMech is toned down, yeah, like it might be time for the Castellan.
So you're saying I should get a Castellan?
Yes. You can borrow mine if you need. If you'd rather do that.
You have a Castellan?
I do.
Okay.
It was a housewarming gift.
Today I learned.
So I just pulled up 40K stats. So the top 5 factions, including Yunari, win percentage factions are Jukari, Iron Hands, Cult Mechanicus, Grey Knights, and Orcs in that order. And Jukari, a bunch of boats and bodies, but the bodies can kind of get killed by like any old shooting.
Yeah.
Like crappier shooting, the better. Iron Hands is a bunch of tanks. Cult Mechanicus is a swarm.
They're a horde army. It's all infantry. Those are the good lists.
Yep.
Sometimes it's a plane, but it's mostly just like 100 infantry.
Grey Knights is a bunch of tanks.
Yep. 5. It's the 4 to 6 Dread Knights.
And even if it's not just the Dread Knights, their regular troop marines are like, once you've killed the Dread Knights, it's like, yeah, shooting like a las cannon or something into a troop choice feels bad, but like it's still not even that terribly points inefficient. Just
it's a 24-point model. Like it's like that model is worth more than the gun. Like
yeah. And then orcs, which are orc buggies. So like our top 5, besides Colt Mechanicus, it's pretty vehicle heavy.
The issue though is that Cult Mechanicus is so far ahead of everyone else that like if you can't win a GT if you're not skewed to beat Cult Mechanicus, which might be why all these vehicle lists are just destroying people.
Yeah. And while the Cult, yeah, it's hard to say that the Cult Mechanicus list doesn't just crush a list that brings like 20 multi-meltas.
Yeah, you don't have a chance.
Like, you don't have a chance. Yeah.
Which I think was TJ's thought with Leviathan. It was like it's good against, it can kill toughness 8 vehicles and it can kill like 20 AdMech models.
But overall,
those things. But, you know.
And don't get me wrong, Colt Mechan. So I'm actually looking at the stats. So Jukari had 120 total lists. Iron Hands had 30. Colt Mechanicus had 95. Grey Knights had 45, and Orcs had 70. So if you're looking at the top 5, that's about a third of them. A little bit less than that. About a fourth of the meta is Colt Mechanicus. I don't know. That's not. But the rest of it is anti-vehicle. That's like, it's not bad to skew into the anti-vehicle side at that point. Just hope to dodge the 1 and 4 a few times. It feels bad, but
yeah, but I mean, like you're gonna roll the dice on that kind of list. But like if you win that bet, like I feel like you make out pretty well.
Yeah, so I don't think you can do that if you're like, I want to win the GT, but if you're like, I would like to do well at the GT, yeah, roll up with 20 melta guns, you will do well at the GT.
Right, but if enough people do that, then all of a sudden, all the melta guns were the correct option, because the melta gun v melta gun fight.
I mean, it depends on what you're putting the melta guns on. Gladiator Reapers?
Gladiator Valiants, there we are. Gladiator Valiants. Let's do it.
What is a Gladiator Valiant, pray tell?
All right,
I've never heard of this.
It has a twin Las Talon, and its side sponsons are multi-meltas. It's 100. It's a 230 points, T8, 12 wounds.
This isn't a good model.
God, next thing you know, you're gonna tell me that there's a model called like a Storm Speeder.
There is a model called the Storm Speeder.
I'm being facetious, Benjamin.
Okay.
What if I told you that Ben and I are planning on bringing it to a tournament this weekend?
What, a Storm Speeder? Or the Gladiator?
Yeah. Storms. Oh,
both.
Yes,
but not the crappy melta gun one. We've correctly identified that we would like the one with 100 million anti-infantry shots.
So my list is a Primaris Tech Marine with the Ironstone and the Pick a unit that get all doctrines. 2 units attack Marines. A Redemptor Dreadnought with. We didn't decide on Plasma or Gatling, but I think we wanted to get Gatling. Okay, Underslung Gatling. Storm Bolters. The super contemptor of double last cannon missile launcher, make the character make it 6s to hit double hit. Storm speeder with the anti-infantry profile and gladiator reaper.
And I'm bringing 2 Vindicators and 4 Psychers.
Hot damn.
It'll be fun. Chat is just to bring us back to the nonsense team tournament stuff. Chat just says seems like everyone else is planning to beat things that are not AdMech and just taking the hit when you face them. There's some of that mentality going around for sure. I know because a lot of lists just cannot actually do both. Like you just can't actually beat AdMech and a bunch of toughness 6 vehicles. Like those 2 lists are too different from each other.
Well, that was my point a second ago. If 75% of the meta is not AdMech and you feel like you can make your matchup good against 75%, it's the correct choice if you want to play a particular faction.
Yes, but not necessarily if you want to win the GT, because while 75%, I was reading, 75% of the fields that AdMech's the top. AdMech is unbelievably good right now. They just crush all the secondaries and primaries.
The map says it's actually still Drakari on top.
Right, but we've talked about this before. Right? It's because every Drakari list is busted, but like the best AdMech lists are heinous, whereas you can build reasonable AdMech lists.
That's true.
But yeah, I'm really enjoying T-Sons. I plan on keep playing them. I looking to keep hobbying on them too. I'm really enjoying building and painting T-Sons, which I haven't been enjoying hobbying for like basically since COVID started. I've just been like, I have no interest in hobbying. I just don't want to do it. And now I'm just like, wow, like I like the way they look. I have a paint scheme that I actually really like. I'm colorblind, so sometimes I really struggle finding paint schemes. I'm like, wow, this paint scheme looks good to me. Most paint schemes are like, yeah, this is shades of gray. Yay. I like this like metallic blue and gold paint scheme that like actually I really like. I don't know if other people like it, but you know what? I'm not painting for them. And I like all like the kit bashing and like modeling opportunities they have. So yeah, I'm really enjoying every aspect of this army. So I'm having a great time.
Yeah, I just looked up the T-Whip percentage for Cult Mechanicus and Drakari. T-Whip, as a reminder, is tournament winning percentage. It's your ratio of the goal of the set is you look at your percentage of the field that you are, and then of the field that was 4-0 at one point in the event, what percentage did you end up being? And you compare those two, and if you end up having more 4-0s than the overall meta percentage, that means your list is very strong, and vice versa. If you're less, then you're probably a weak faction. And so Cult Mechanicus is 7% of the meta, and they have a T-Whip of 12%.
Oh no!
Oh, it gets worse.
Oh, Drakari's heinous.
Drakari is 8%, and they have a T-Whip percentage of 28%.
Yeah, that still doesn't surprise me though, because
no, like I just think it backs up your data. I actually think it backs up your point, because what that means to me, you have some people who are just playing AdMech and losing, and their still overall win percentage is high enough to like support the 60 percentage, where Drakari are mostly all the lists are good. You don't have the casual list dragging down the T-Whip, because casual lists drag down T-Whip more than they drag down win percentage.
Yeah, because there's like, what's the casual Drakari list? Like what are Drakari? Drakari are dudes in transports. Well, that list is insane. Like, so anyway, anything else you guys want to talk about? The GTA went to, or T-Sun stuff, because now I have like many games of T-Suns under my belt, or any other thoughts of those top armies at the event?
No, not particularly. Other than I don't want to Stella now, so that's really my main takeaway.
They're really good. unless you're playing Admech, then they're
They're
bad.
really good, and I wanted one for a while, so I should just go buy one.
Yeah, probably. All right. I believe that is it for us then. Chris, you want to take us out?
Yep. All right. Thank you everybody for listening to this week's episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit a bell, do a thing, all of that good stuff on YouTube and Spotify and all of that stuff. We're live every Monday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. And in the meantime, roll any ones.